Sorry to keep you waiting. Welcome to the world of Pokemon. This world is inhabited by creatures called Pokemon, with a power that sometimes goes over the line of what's fair. For this reason, many Pokemon moves and strategies have been banned over the years in competitive battles. Today, we'll take a look at some of the most interesting ones, game by game. Let's start with the first gen, the primitive and rock glitch hell of the Game Boy cartridges. At least you could always escape from such situations using Dig or Fly. Except of course in its competitive where both moves were banned. Considering that these games were already a jungle full of programming nonsense and things that work all in the wrong way but were still allowed, imagine how broken those two moves had to be to end up banned. Well, yeah, they were broken, although not exactly due to their power. Both were really good moves in game. One was the most solid and reliable flying type choice except for niche moves that only very specific Pokemon learned, and Dick in the first gen had no less than 100 base, making it just slightly slower Earthquake. Of course, things change when facing a real person, because as you can imagine, in a game that's all about predicting the opponent, using moves that tell what you are going to do in the next turn is not the smartest idea. Broken refers to something more literal. As you know, in the first turn of charge of these moves, the Pokemon, underground or in the sky, obtains a semi-invulnerability status in which no move can hit it, with some exceptions. On the following turn, the Pokemon attacks and recovers its vulnerability, but in the first gen, there was a glitch that if the Pokemon is paralyzed during the charge turn, the move will be disrupted, but the semi-invulnerable status will not be reset. A sort of Schrodinger's moles and birds. Or that's what we would like, because to make things worse, a huge list of Pokemon learned these moves, which in that situation could be stuck in a limbo between the earth, the sky, the battlefield, making the victory practically guaranteed by being able to attack without receiving any hit, with the first generation being the paralysis realm, where everyone used Thunder Wave everywhere. To import abuse the way crits worked with speed, it would be absurdly easy to switch to a Pokemon with these attacks predicting this move, something especially detrimental to the game when at this time you couldn't see the opponent's full team. It was a weird and unfair trick that hindered decision making in general and could lead to truly weird situations in some cases. And the forbidden scheme of the second generation is just as bizarre. There are no Pokemon remarkable enough to be banned here, with the exception of course of the legendary game mascots. A serious anomaly of this competitive is precisely how its best Pokemon was not banned. Yep, you heard that right. With its immortal moveset of Course and Rest, Corsola was considered by many more powerful than Mewtwo, Lugia and Ho-Oh. And it still was not uber, as it was overall a relatively benign Pokemon for the metagame, with lots of teams with common Pokemon that were able to stop it. For the time and before the scope opened up too much with abilities, it was a surprisingly developed competitive if you ask me. So it seems that the only aspect that managed to spoil things enough to be banned was the so-called sleep trapping, or the combination of Millook or Spiderweb with a sleep-inducing status move. The best at doing this was Misdreavus, so in practice we could consider it the banned Pokemon, or rather the most nerfed of these games. It's not too hard to figure out why this combo became such a problem. If they put your Pokemon to sleep, you can switch it to keep attacking so that your opponent doesn't get free turns. If you get trapped, you can attack the one who did it with wherever you have. But the union of both directly denies you any action. You can only let the turns pass, while the opponent, for example, uses Curse or Perish Song while it recovers with the leftovers. In my sweet childhood, the 15th was the most awaited day of the month. That was the usual date on which a new issue of Nintendo Action could be available at the stores. It was back in the days of the 3rd gen, with Ruby and Sapphire, when I started to buy it every month. And my favorite section was the consulting room, where Professors Birch and Oak answered Poke questions from fans and sometimes gave advice on their teams. It was all very neat, but one thing that I didn't understand as a kid was the obsession they had with adding a Wobbuffet to every single team. No matter how the starting team was, the Pokemon professors always suggested adding this creature, which was something weird to me since I didn't know how to properly use it. But of course, whenever I had to face one on the battle tower, there were always serious problems. All of this, along with a couple of episodes in the anime in which it demonstrated its potential, resulted in my childish mind creating an idealized image of this Pokemon. But for once, I was on the right track. With its massive HP and paper-thin defenses, it's a Pokemon designed to take massive damage and strike back with twice as much power. Wobbuffet went from a 2nd gen in which it was practically useless in the competitive because you could just switch Pokemon to neutralize its strategy, to receiving in the 3rd gen one of the best abilities ever, Shadow Tag. That, combined with the new Anchor, trapped the opponent in its game, and if it was well used, forced it to fall irremediably at Wobbuffet's mercy. So it would quickly move to Ubers, where it would become the supreme god killer. But I didn't want to talk about Wobbuffet because it wasn't alone. Wynaut would be joining it in Uber this generation. Being basically the same Pokemon but much more small and fragile, Wynaut would be good enough to be banned for the rest of the tiers, and it even was occasionally seen in battles in that terrain of Pokegods, always together with its dad, forming a tandem of two Shadow Taggers in the same team. This god killer baby was one of the greatest anomalies in the history of the competitive, and it remained like that for generations to come. In 4th gen, Wynaut would still be Uber, but because of a real and legitimate use here, with the arrival of the Custom Berry, a new delicacy that, when the Pokemon is left with less than a quarter of HP, allows the holder to move first in the priority bracket. This could lead to the small creature taking the hit of many Pokegods, striking them back really hard, and then using Destiny Bond with priority to make the next opponent also faint. It's a rather niche strategy, but totally real and respectable. Why didn't they choose the Lychee Berry to do this? The delicacy of Mirage Island, crowded by the monsters of your mind, taking the shape of this baby. The 4th generation, an era of harmony and global peace in which your main worry was whether the PlayStation could read the game and what you'd call your Nintendo's pet. Maybe it wasn't such a great era, but precisely the Nintendo DS turned the world upside down. And no kidding, touchscreens started to become trendy as a result of this console, so surely we are not aware of how influential it would be, not only for the video game industry, but for the world in general. But another not so well known feature of the console was its built-in microphone. In Pokemon, its use was quite limited, like screaming at the console while the Pokeball was bouncing, then Chatot. This cute parakeet seemed at first glance to be following the train of Farfetch and Delibird as the meme bird of the generation, but with a decent offensive power, nasty plot and some interesting moves, it was quite a fighter, although obviously it could not be banned for that. Chatot's signature move was Chatter, and it wasn't that far off the mark. Chatter is a flying type move that, besides inflicting damage, can confuse a target. What's interesting is that throughout the DS microphone you could customize the sound that the Pokemon made when using it, allowing the player to make this poor little bird say anything, including various crimes against humanity. For some reason, Chatter still kept the custom sound feature for the following 5th gen to be finally removed in the 6th one, where the move would always confuse the target, what was pretty good, but being precisely the 4th gen era when official competitions were revived outside of Japan, I think it was a wise decision to completely ban this creature. They can't give you anything fun, man. Now it's time for my dear 5th generation, where I had my first contact with a competitive world. Over the generations, status conditions have been one of the pillars of battles, and among them, sleep was always one of the most relevant. Pokemon are incapable of any action in the realm of Morpheus, but in the 5th generation, something terrible happened. Although it's not the only generation in which some moves that put the opponent to sleep have been banned or nerfed due to the huge impact and excessive power that some of them could have on battles, in the 5th gen, it was the status condition sleep as such that was completely banned. This extreme decision was due to the fact that usually and in the rest of generations, Pokemon sleep for a certain number of turns. They are accumulated and make keeping a Pokemon asleep something relatively bearable. But in Pokemon Black and White, for some reason, they decided that the sleep counter resets to its original amount when switched out. This forced the sleeping Pokemon to spend turns in front of the opponent doing nothing, which of course was a horrible position to be in. Could this change have something to do with the way this generation focuses on the dream world as a unique representation of the Pokemon world? Because if it's good to live, it's even better to dream, and above all, to wake up. But for now, I wanted to take a moment to talk about something important regarding my content. You might have noticed a certain monotony in my voiceovers and occasional pronunciation mistakes in my videos. The reason behind this was my use of an AI to clone my voice. As you may have noticed, I'm not a native English speaker. I was feeling a bit insecure about my accent and pronunciation, and I thought this was a quick fix. I put in effort to make it sound as natural as possible, but deep down, I wasn't comfortable with the idea of relying on artificial intelligence. When I started using these tools, I didn't fully grasp the ethical implications, and by the time I realized it, I had been using them for months. Changing the approach seemed like a daunting task, especially since all other aspects of my videos, editing, research, art, animation, were entirely my own. However, as we entered 2024, I decided it was time for a change. I've made the choice to use my own voice from now on, pushing myself to improve my pronunciation and delivery. It might sound a bit strange at first, and I might make a few mistakes, but to me, it's a significant opportunity to grow. I appreciate your support during this transition because, for me, it's about finding peace within myself. This video marks a special moment. It's the first time you have heard my real and natural voice. Moving forward, all the voiceovers in my videos will be authentically me. Thanks for being a part of this journey, and I'm excited for what the future holds.